brings me great pleasure to officially inaugurate the National Council on Privatization.
The mandate is one of commercialization, privatization, optimizing government investment.
Life is about evolving. Life is very dynamic. But resident at the BPE is incredible experience and exposure, knowledge and information. It's an information powerhouse. The way forward is still the public-private partnership.
Welcome to OTNA, your window to information on optimization.
Abraham Lincoln, an American lawyer, politician, and statesman who served as the 16th president of the United States of America from 1861, while at Gettysburg to honor the soldiers who sacrificed their lives, said that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth. And that's true. Here in Africa, and precisely in Nigeria, the story is the same. Stakeholders agree that a government is an institution through which leaders exercise power to make and enforce laws. A government's basic functions are providing leadership, maintaining order, providing public services, and providing national security, providing economic security, and providing economic assistance. This explains why most analysts say that a government has no business in business. So which way to go? That's why we're here. This is OTNA, Optimizing the Nation's Assets. Here on OTNA, we navigate the process of optimization of the nation's assets through privatization and commercialization. Now, the National Council on Privatization, NCP, is the think tank of the Nigerian government to determine the political, economic, and social objective of the privatization and commercialization of Nigeria's public enterprises, with the Bureau of Public Enterprises, BPE, as its secretariat. Today, we'll take a journey into the operations of the Bureau of Public Enterprises, BPE, to understand the workings of the BPE and the process that leads to privatization and commercialization. My guests, current actors who are there. We call them optimizers. Stay with us.
This is OTNA, Optimizing the Nation's Assets.
We are involved in bringing up the status of the assets that are almost near moribund, or assets that have been that federal government has been abandoned or not being utilized. So we're trying to make sure that we bring investors into the place and make the commercial life more viable and make life more meaningful for Nigeria.
To make conventional life more viable, most countries of the world are actually driven by the private sector. And many studies have concluded that private sector development encourages economic growth due to many public enterprises' poor performance and technological deficiencies, hence the need for reforms. Now, the history of reforms in Nigeria certainly has a strategy that drives it. What is the strategy?
The history of reforms it can be dated back to about 35 years, when we have the Technical Committee on Privatization and Commercialization that was set up by the former president, Babangida. And the intent then was to liberalize our economy, when it was discovered that some of the entities that were set up by government when we had that windfall from our crude oil in the 70s that were used to set up some some companies. So specifically, I can talk to you about 4 things which are the key drivers while we are doing reform. The first one is to bring in the capital that government doesn't actually have in excess. The private sector people are the ones that have the capital to bring into the economy. They have the managerial expertise in terms of running it to generate efficiency. The third one is to bring innovation. There are some things that we are doing before, that new technology may be required, and the private sector people are the ones that cannot do that. Then to open up the economy so that we can generate employment for our team youth. Strategy is like a focal point of the Bureau that ensure that all the plans that we have are next together so that we will ensure that we have sustainability in our funding, which is key because there's no way you can run any reform without funding. So what we do in strategy is to bring in the plans by the department into a place where it's be coordinated.
In Nigeria, the private sector accounts for about 90% of the nation's gross domestic product, GDP. Accordingly, the federal government, under the leadership of President Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, GCFR, is determined to build a vibrant economy for the nation to flourish. And this is where the mandate of the BPE as the Secretariat of the NCP begins. The process of reforms in Nigeria involves a lot of stakeholder engagement.
As head of stakeholding and external relations for Bureau of Public Enterprises, I am the image maker of the organization. I am also the relationship manager for the organization. Our stakeholders are wide and many, but most especially the MDAs that we have to deal with, the National Assembly members, the ministers, the various people that are in the enterprises that we need to privatize.
If I dimension the kind of work we do in BPE into 100, stakeholder engagement will be like 70. In our way, when we say, okay, today we want to do this sector, what we first do is to identify who are the key stakeholders. We now do our stakeholders mapping. And when we say stakeholders, I mean, when you talk of, if you're talking of Ministry of Power now that you want to work on, you need to engage Minister of Power, you need to engage the PAMSEC, you need to engage the other players in that sector. And by doing that, we will sell the ideas to them. By selling the ideas to them, we now go to the National Council on Privatization for them to buy into what we are doing. And if that one is done, so a committee will be constituted, which we normally call a steering committee. Most of the time, that steering committee is usually chaired by the ministry minister, the minister in charge of that ministry, such that they will be brought on board, they will understand it, and will be projected together. And the critical part of stakeholder engagement are the labor, because I mean, like every individual, you will first want to protect what you have. So you need to let them understand the fact that what you are doing is to open up the space for them so that they can get better salary, their welfare can be improved. And so in some instances, we normally have some bit of resistance, but as we go ahead, they normally buy into our plans. And so it's, as I said, stakeholders engagement is one of our critical parts when we are doing our strategy. If that is not actually captured, then there's nothing you want to do.
Let's take a break and take the transaction analysis of the BPE work so far. Harriet Adams leads us in this.
Let's inform you on OTNA that the federal government defined some objectives to constitute the framework for present and future programs in the power sector in Nigeria. Recognizing the importance of the availability of energy at economically acceptable costs and in sufficient quality, the objectives include promotion of competition to facilitate more rapid provision of service throughout the country, creation of a new legal and regulatory environment for the sector that establishes a level playing field, encourages private investment and expertise, and meets social goals, restructuring the power sector and privatizing the business units to be created out of it, encouraging successor companies to undertake an ambitious investment program. Thus, the power sector reforms aim at setting the country on the journey to efficient, safe, affordable and cost-effective electricity industry that will not only provide continuous electricity supply to consumers in all geographical areas in Nigeria, but will also support a more robust economic growth in the country.
Thank you very much, Harriet. Now, to have success is one thing, but to measure success correctly is actually another. The Bureau of Public Enterprises BPE consciously measures the success of its strategies and initiatives using specific key performance indicators, KPIs, to evaluate progress.
On a yearly basis, we usually prepare what we call a work plan that has the tasks, the milestones, and the deliverables. Each department normally come up with what they want to do. So when departments come up with their own work plan, strategy will look at it to ensure that those plans are smart in terms of specific, measurable, achievable, not just something that you're just thinking of doing. We track our processes through the KPIs, and we have what we call in BPE balanced scorecard, which is to look at the 4 dimensions of our project: the financial component, stakeholder engagement, which I've spoken about, then our work process and leadership growth, because there's no way you will be able to sustain whatever you're trying to do if you don't empower the younger one in terms of capacity building.
Let's get some insight into how the Bureau handles various stakeholders, including government agencies, private entities, investors, and the public, to ensure a collaborative and informed process.
For the MDAs, if we need to privatize an enterprises that's under an MDA, we need to be able to meet with the MDAs. We need to come to an agreement. We cannot ride roughshod over anybody. So we need to sit down at the table and come to an agreement of what to do and how to go about it. Some of the strategies we apply is to ensure that we call them to the table, sit down with them and inform them of what we want to do and how we intend to go about it. To let them know that we're not taking away their jobs, but that we are going to bring more to the table. We're going to ensure that there's a wider coverage, there's more utility of government assets, and to just carry them along in everything that we need to do. We continue to meet with the stakeholders until the enterprises is privatized.
Effective stakeholder engagement management requires comprehensive approach, which includes communication, listening, and collaboration. But even with international best practices, these procedures certainly involve some risk. Now, what are the risk mitigation strategies implemented by the BPE?
We've developed what we call enterprise risk management framework. And what is in that framework is to a kind of giving us an idea of our level of appetite, what level of risk can we actually absorb. We've dimensioned the kind of risks that we have in our process. So what we do when we are dimensioning what should be our risk is to say, okay, which one is institutional, which is like strategic risk, which one is transactional, and which one are the normal process risk. Financial due diligence, we need technical due diligence. If you say you've done something elsewhere in the world that makes you to think you can run a particular entity here, we want to see what you've done. How are you able to get your money? I mean, it's a learning process. With the experience we had with some of our enterprises that we privatized to people that were unable to manage it well, we've now adopted a way of identifying those risks and providing a way of mitigating them. The world is moving away from divestment into PPP, and that is the initiative we brought into our space. The way you divest may not be the way you do PPP, because what you are doing in PPP is that you are sharing risk, and you must be sure that the risk that is being given to the government is the one that they are best placed to manage. And what are the risks that are usually given to the government? Is political. But the risk being given to private sector should be construction risk, could be operational risk, should be financial risk. So the smart investors, if your people are not actually trained, may want to push those kind of risks that should be theirs. Because PPP, as it said, is just a way whereby private sector and public sector come together.
OTNA, optimizing the nation's assets.
Undoubtedly, feedback is crucial for stakeholders. Let's find out the mechanism put in place to ensure that the concerns of stakeholders and their suggestions are considered in the decision-making process?
In most instances, yes, we have pushbacks that people are saying, no, we don't want to do this, but we cannot enforce it. So we just re-engage them. We re-engage them and ensure that they are carried along in the process of what we want to do. I'll give an instance of a very recent sensitization program that we did for the PHCN verification. We went on the radio, we went on the TV, on our social media handles. It was all there, telling people long ahead before we started the verification process that this is what we intend to do. This is what we'll be doing, given the dates, the time, and everything that we needed to do. One that comes to mind, readily to mind, is SACO. Initially, the staff were not happy with the change. They thought it was going to take away their jobs. But I'm sure that if any Nigerian can afford to take the time to go there now, they will see that it's a much better environment. The place is being beautifully run after being privatized. The staff are happy. And to the best of my knowledge, I think that's a very happy organization right now.
Now, we go to post-privatization, and this is another important area. There are mechanisms, they say, in the BPE that is put in place to ensure post-privatization support.
The one that many Nigerians may want to ask is about, okay, what is happening in the power sector? We did power sectors in 2012, 2013, and Nigerians are thinking that by now, there will be 24. There are challenges, and BP has brought a lot of initiative towards addressing those challenges. The DISREP is there, which we are doing. DISREP is distributor companies' recovery plan. How do we ensure that those distributor companies that are performing suboptimally now are enabled to perform better? And that kind of process is being driven by the Bureau to ensure that, okay, there's liquidity in that, because the investors are ready to actually transform that place. But because we are not doing cost-reflective tariff as it is for now, and there were fundamentals that actually made the initial projection not to work that way. So the thinking is that, okay, through the World Bank that has agreed to give us some money, we are seeing how we are going to channel that money into the discos as loan. But it's not just going to be given to them free. It's going to be tied to particular KPIs, metering, which is key. So that's part of what we are doing in the Bureau.
The government, under the leadership of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu GCFR, says they are determined to harness the gains of the private sector innovation. Thus, after the constitution of the 6th National Council on Privatization (NCP), led by the chairman, who is Vice President Senator Kashim Shettima, GCON, the opportunities is now ours for the taking. Let's get to hear some of the success stories from the optimizers.
We've done concessioning, we've done full privatization. You can go, you take it from all the way from element petrochemicals. You can see what is happening there, how life has been turned around. You can see the telecom sector. You can see the number of people that are engaged. Initially, people will talk of high prices. When you just privatize, things might be a little bit on the high side. But as down the economy, you see the spread, and you see how things are reaching out to the common Nigerian.
The various organizations that we've privatized, not only the staff in there, but the management. We have to carry them along because we continue to monitor them to ensure that they give the optimal performance that is expected of them.
The telecom sector that everybody is enjoying now actually is one of the handwork of the Bureau. The port reform that we did in 2005-2006 made our port to be one of the up in the West African country.
from the north to the south, east to the west. Everywhere, the story is the same. The gains of privatization and commercialization will certainly rank Nigeria among the top economies, not just in Africa, but globally. What lessons have the BPE learned from previous privatization efforts? And how have these lessons influenced the continuous improvement of strategies to ensure success?
Lessons learned is that no relationship is too small and no relationship is to be ignored. From most times, sometimes starting from the top may not necessarily get you the necessary support you need. We may start from the bottom sometimes. We start in the middle, wherever it is that we can find some kind of comfort, we can start from there.
You must identify the risk. You must map them to who are the influencer to help you to mitigate those risks. There is no way we will hand over any asset of the government to any investors if we are not satisfied by our due diligence. And we're not the only one doing it. We are partnering with EFCC, NFIU, to ensure that if there is any flag from their end, we will not, no matter how close we are towards concluding that transaction, we won't conclude it. Because the objective of reform, of divestment, must be achieved. We are not selling those entities just for the sake of selling them. It's for whoever that will buy them to transform them and ensure that they perform optimally.
Ensuring sustained positive relationships is certainly essential. How does the BPE plan for sustainability of stakeholder engagement, especially in the long term?
What we try to do in BPE to retain them is to ensure that there is policy alignment, because it's very important. To be able to retain and hold on to your investors, policies, government policies must be aligned. And so that's one of the fights that we have taken on in BPE to ensure that government policies align and encourage investors to stay.
The gains of reforms properly done are very clear for all to see. And when the professionals do the job, the results will show. As said, it's true. The BPE is equipped to do this job and to succeed in this regard. Privatization and commercialization will certainly give us a better Nigeria. But the fact remains that Nigerians are in a hurry to see results. What I can assure you is that here on OTNA, we will track the results for you as they happen and as they go on. So make it a date with us every week on OTNA.
Optimizing the nation's assets.
Every time you look at life, you must look at it from the position of what electricity represents: light.
Nigeria have all capabilities, extending the grid, upgrading it to the best technology now will attract more investors in the power generation sector